So Nathan, do you wanna go ahead and kick us off?
Yeah, I think probably this is going to be our group for tonight, I'm guessing. So this was the first week, and I can't remember if I did a good job of alerting you to this in the group chat or not, but the word that was going to pop up for you is different than the word that they talked about in the Bible Project, because they were talking about the noun version of the word ahava, and you probably saw like ahab or aheb, maybe, depending on how they transliterated it. So I hope that wasn't too confusing, but basically that's just the verb form of love. So anyway, I'm just curious what you guys saw as you were going through it. This one, it was a little bit less as far as the number of times it's used. And so it felt to me like I was able to go a little bit deeper with it, just because I didn't have this, thousands of words or thousands of verses to look through. It wasn't quite so overwhelming. So I don't know what you guys saw, but I would love to hear.
I was using that word that you just said, and now I can't remember how to say it.
I'm not sure if I'm saying it right either.
Well, when you listen to the video, it pronounces it, and that's how I was saying it. And then now I forgot what it was.
I think he was saying it ahava.
Ahava.
Yeah,
Ahava. Yeah.
I was going to remember that.
Wonder how many times you repeat it to yourself. It's like somebody's name. I can't remember a name for nothing. I've even tried somebody introduces themselves and you repeat their name back to yourself a bunch of times. Yeah, it lasts about 15 seconds in my head, and then it's like squirrel gone.
Yeah.
Unless I relate somebody to somebody else, that's the only way it happens for me.
Yeah.
So interesting little thing, Nathan. So I was looking through the Old Testament, like the concordance in my Bible, and I found the word ahava in here.
Mm-hmm.
And it's number 163, and it says, at least in here, it says probably of foreign origin, ahava, a river of Babylon. That's what it actually says.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Wait a second. Okay. Now, well, no, probably not. If they're saying probably, well, now I'm curious. There were 4 rivers flowing out of Eden in Genesis chapter 2, I want to say. Let me look and see what the names of those rivers were.
I saw that. I remember seeing that as a reference.
So the
Pishon, the Gishon, Tigris, and Euphrates.
That's okay. Yeah. There's one that flowed around. That sounded familiar to me when you said that, but I think what I was doing, the Pishon, it says, flows around the whole land of Havilah, which I think maybe in
pretty
my
close.
mind, it sounded like Ahava. So I think they're totally different words. So okay, never mind. Sometimes the rabbit hole just ends and there's nothing there. But that is interesting that's maybe where that word came from. I wonder how
where they came up with that
ends up being the word for love.
Actually, I'm just noticing they don't have an H on the end in this one, in the concordance, and he puts an H on the end when he talks about it in the Bible Project.
Yeah.
So maybe that's the difference, but I don't
know. Different websites seem to transliterate these things in different ways. Like Bible Hub, I think it's AHEB is how they transliterate it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But then Blue Letter Bible, it's AHAB. And so that's just taking the Hebrew pronunciation and trying to spell it out as best as you can in English. So I think different people just have different ways of doing it.
There's also a Jewish chronicle that talks about Ahava, how he talks about it in meaning of love and to act lovingly toward or be loyal to, that kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
And that's from a Jewish writing, if you want to say that. Yeah. Anyway, interesting.
Mhm.
It's interesting that in the Bible Hub, the first verse that comes up is the one that Tim quoted this morning about love your neighbor. You know, you can't pick and choose.
Mhm.
So that is interesting.
Yeah, this morning was perfect. Talked
Yeah.
about, I mean, you brought it right up. So it's
Exactly.
pretty interesting. Yeah. Fits right with our conversation. Did you guys take anything away from that, or is anything you guys notice? Diane, Curtis, did you guys notice anything as you
Well, I
were
think
reading through it?
like the love, love thy neighbor or whatever, and just the word love itself is just to be able to show, compassion to somebody, or helping somebody in need, or helping somebody in anything. I mean, I think that's,
Without wanting anything in return.
yeah. It's, I mean, I think it's, wanting to help somebody. I mean, it could be as simple as, mowing their yard or whatever. But that's showing love. And, I think I have much more, it's much easier for me to help somebody else than to ask for help. So that's, I'm trying to think of that as, okay, is it easier for me to love somebody than let somebody love me? And when you think of the combination like that, it's like, I am a difficult person, aren't I?
Yes, yes.
But it's like, I'd do anything. If somebody asks me for help, I'll do anything, but I'm not going to ask anybody to help me.
Fine, then.
What? But I mean, it's like, and just to see, somebody, I've done like the missions trips and stuff like that, and just to do stuff for people. I mean, to me, it's a way to show God's love to them, is wanting to do something for other people. And it doesn't matter who they are.
Yeah. Brilliant.
Yeah.
So to me, like, love is like an action.
Yep. I think you hit the nail on the head when you said that. That's exactly how, going through this study before, also going through it again, seeing it more as an action word that requires something. It's something that requires something of me. It isn't something that I can just say, I love you, and it's being a passive word, but it's an active word that requires movement. It requires me to show that fruit somehow, in some way, and moving close to God. And of course, the neighbor, love thy neighbor. It's not a passive thing, it's an active thing. It requires us to take action towards that neighbor, as it were. So yeah, definitely same for me. That was the very first thing I picked up the very first time I read this, and I really started to think on it and look at the scriptures, is that the word is overused in our Western society. Actually, it's just overused in our world, I think. And we hear it so often and so frequent about so many things that really it doesn't fit. And we've just kind of played that word down, and we've lost the depth of what it can mean. And then to take it a step further and to say, when you hear God is love, what does that mean? How does that fit into that covenantal love? How does that fit into the response that I should have towards him? So anyway, I could go much deeper, but I think that's the idea for me, was just like, there has to be something more than just, it's just a word. It just, there's something behind it, I think. So
Yeah. Guys want to hear some fun math?
yes, always.
Math person, I guess. So I actually went through, just for fun, I wanted to see how many times Ahava was used versus Ahab or Ahab, however you say it. So ahab is the verb form, and then ahava is the noun form. So the verb form is used in the Hebrew Bible 6 times as much as the noun form, which I think tells you something right there. I mean, the fact that love is used as a verb 6 times more than it's used as a noun that's describing a concept. It's so much of the Hebrew Bible, love is something you do. Or love is something you're commanded to do. It's not something that you're just talking about. And I think in our culture, we use love as a noun sometimes, even when we're talking about, oh, I love that person. I think a lot of times when we say I love that person, what we're really saying is I feel love for that person. In other words, we're still using it as a noun when we say it like that, right? So I think it's misused, because to say that you love somebody should mean I'm doing something for that person, because we're using it as a verb when we say I love you. But we're kind of almost using it as a noun when we say that. It's like I feel love for you is what we a lot of times mean when we say I love you. So anyway, that's just helpful for me to sort of think about, okay, if I use it as a verb, then I should follow through with my statement and actually do something. So anyway, I thought that was kind of cool, just seeing the difference between those 2 words. You want to know when the book of the Bible that ahava is used the most in? Not the book of the Bible, the book of the Hebrew Bible, I should say, because I didn't check like the whole Bible, Old and New Testament. But
I'm counting on you to have way much more time on your hands to do this. So yes, I want to know.
It's Song of Solomon or Song of Songs.
Oh, I was gonna guess
Is that
that.
what you were gonna guess? Yeah, that would have been a good guess. It kind of makes sense, right? I mean, it's a book about love, so they're actually talking about love. They're discussing love, and so it's more of like a meditation on what love is. So it makes sense they'd be using the noun form of that word a lot in that book, but a lot of other places in the Hebrew. I mean, it would be way more than 6 times that it's used as a verb, as opposed to a noun if it wasn't for Song of Songs or Song of Solomon, because it's used so much in that book. So it's kind of another interesting little.
That is interesting.
It is.
That was always an interesting book to discuss with the high schoolers.
Yes, I'm impressed you discussed it with high schoolers.
Well, I was given a challenge, and it was like, they asked, and it was like, hey, all right, let's do it.
Yeah, it's a part of their life, so it's good that you're talking about it. Okay, what else?
Yeah, because anybody else have anything else or?
Look at me.
Quit looking at me.
I'm kind of wondering, and maybe this is something I can dive into this week as I finally get to do this word, is like if there's other words that are used for the word love, or if there's a difference between like love between God and people versus people and people. I don't know if there is another word for that, but it'd be interesting to kind of look into.
That is a great question. And I was wondering the same thing. So I looked into that, and as best as I could tell, ahab or ahava is the word.
Mm-hmm. Same.
So
that's what I'm seeing as well.
Yeah. But very good question, because you're right. A lot of times they'll have multiple words to describe the same concept, but in this case, it seems like it's pretty straightforward. It's just that one.
Yeah, so there's like layers of those words too, like a brotherly love or a physical intimacy type love, or more of a loyalty type love and things of that nature. So a lot of times that'll fit within the context of the scripture that's being where it's talked about, but sometimes hard to tell. It's hard to know. The concordance they do the best they can, obviously, to give you like, hey, here's the verses where they're talking about brotherly love, and here's the verse they're talking about the different types. But yeah, it is interesting because I had the same exact thought as well. I was kind of trying to look up, okay, what are the other words for love? Like, is there something else that I'm missing? Which it's not surprising to me that there's not, because there's so few words in the Hebrew language as a whole, and multiple words are used in different ways. So, but yeah.
So I guess that's true. Well, in the New Testament, is there like a Greek word? Is it translated into Greek?
So the Greek word, well, Joseph, did you look into this?
I did not.
Okay, so the Greek word that's used in the Septuagint for Deuteronomy 6 is agapao. So agape is it's got kind of the same thing going on. Agape is the noun form, agapao is the verb form. And so when I was looking through the New Testament just to see how many times it was used. I was just looking at agapao, which is the verb form, and I got to 1 Corinthians and I'm like, wait a second, 1 Corinthians 13 is completely missing here. Like, what? That's all about love. But that's agape. That's the noun form, because again, Paul is discussing what love is. So he's using it as a noun over and over and over again. But the verb form is agapao. But again, that's transliterated. You know, it's spelled with Greek letters, and I couldn't tell you how to spell that off the top of my head.
That's okay.
Alpha,
It'd be impressed if you could there, Nathan, just saying.
alpha, gamma, alpha, and then I'm lost. Pi, right?
I don't know anything
Yes,
about the Greek
yes.
alphabet.
Pi, alpha, omega, maybe. I don't know. That sounds right.
We trust you.
I knew a little bit of Greek at one point in time, but not so much.
Felt Greek to me.
Nice.
But bum.
Exactly.
It's funny. Yeah, so I was going to tag on to what Christina was asking, and then also what Nathan you were talking about. It is interesting if you guys get a chance to look into like agape and that whole thing, because that's also really cool. There's a lot of depth to that as well, in this idea that it's kind of a love without limits, like it's hard to fathom, that we oftentimes, and I do this myself, I love with conditions, and I don't intentionally think that, but then it seems like, my self comes into the equation, and, I start putting limits on certain actions that I'm willing to take forth in a relationship, whether that be to help someone or to be a listening ear rather than someone who's trying to always give advice or something. But it's just a really cool concept, or not concept, but word, to even describe kind of that fatherly love that God gives. It's even beyond my own understanding. I have a limited view of what that is, and someday, when heaven and earth are reunited, I'll get to experience that in a full way. So I have moments, I feel like, as a parent, I have these moments in my life where I feel things that I can't describe, and my heart feels full, and I don't know what that feeling really is. I know it's love, but I just can't really express it. There's no words to really express it. So I can only imagine that that's like just a small little glimpse of like what it's going to be like when we're fully reunited with God, and into how he intended it to be. So
Yeah, I almost wish there was like another word like for the love of God, because it seems like it should be above and beyond like what we use for. I mean, I could walk around and say I love chocolate, or I love whatever, what I mean? That is not the same kind of love that like God shows. And so I think that's probably hard for people to like grasp the deepness of the love of God, because we're overusing the word so much. But it sounds like that's been a problem probably forever. Like there was no, I don't know, I feel like there should have been this like better word for love than what we're getting. Not that it's not a great word, but
Yeah.
I mean, if that's, I don't know, does that make sense?
Yeah, it's been watered down kind of because we use it so much for everything.
Yeah.
Yeah.
which is unfortunate because when you're trying to like explain like the love that God has for someone versus the love you have for, or even humanly love, like you said, Joseph, it's conditional. As much as you don't want it to be, it is in ways. And I think I said this a few weeks ago, but and again, not a parent, but I'm pretty sure like the love for parent to child is probably the closest thing on earth that we're going to have to like the love that God has for us. So I think it's just, sometimes it's hard for people to grasp, especially when people we love hurt us. I think that has been a challenge. Like, as I've talked with people about who God is, it's hard for them to sometimes even understand what love is because of the pain they've experienced from someone that was supposed to be loving them. So just, I'm like, I wish there was like another word that just put God in a totally different category of what love should look like, you know?
Yeah.
I almost agree with you, Christina. I would say like I agree with you that that word is watered down and it's overused, and we need a different word for like the love that God has. But I also think like, and this is one of the things that was cool about skipping from going into the New Testament, is looking at some of the places where love is talked about, especially in the book of John. So you guys know John 14 through 17 is this huge prayer that Jesus prays right before he goes to die. And love is like all over that, you know, just agapao, 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 over and over and over again. And the goal that Jesus has there, it's pretty clear, is that we would love the same way that the Father loves the Son, that we would love each other that way, that we would experience that love from God in the same way. And so I think that I kind of like that the word that's used for God to love us is the same as the word that's used for what we're called to do to God. I like that. I think we need a different word for I love chocolate. You know,
Yes.
like that's not the same. So totally agree with you there. Like we need a different word there. But I like that even in Deuteronomy, you can see it. God is calling us to the exact, or God is calling the Israelites in Deuteronomy to the exact kind of love that he is showing to them. And you're right, they always mess it up. Like they always screw it up. But I think that's part of the whole story, is that, you know, God is relentless in eventually giving us the ability to do it. There's actually a verse in Deuteronomy. If you go all the way through Deuteronomy with the word love, let me see if I can find it real quick, because it was cool. Oh, come on. It was towards the end. Oh, maybe okay, never mind. That's why I wasn't in Deuteronomy. Oh, here we go. Deuteronomy 30 verse 6. So it talks about God basically, it's in the context of God saying, you're going to rebel. I know, or essentially Moses is saying that. He's saying, look, you guys are going to rebel. You're going to mess this up. You always do. You're going to do it again. And you're going to go into exile. But then he says, basically, the plan is that God is going to circumcise the hearts of the Israelites so that they will love him and keep his commands. And it's just so cool, because it's like, okay, you're not going to do this right. I'm calling you to love me. You're not going to love me. So here's the new plan. I am going to circumcise your hearts. In other words, like, I'm going to make it so that you can do this. I'm going to give you the ability to do it, you know. And I think that prophecy is fulfilled when Jesus sends the Spirit, right? I mean, I think that's the idea, is that's when we can love the same way that the Father loves the Son. And yes, it's an ideal that we fall short of most of the time. Absolutely. But I think it's really cool that it's the same. We're called to that same thing, because, man, that's something to aspire to for sure.
It definitely sets that standard of this is what it should be, even though maybe we're we're incapable on our own for sure with the Spirit. I agree with you for sure. You said it much better than I did. I'm with you.
I just said a lot more words.
It was great. You took my thought and you made it better. Well, that is a great way to think about it, because I think that is what we're called to, is to like love the way the Father loves. And that kind of at church today, like that was the whole point, is like we're supposed to be loving our neighbors, loving the people that God's putting around us and in our lives, or connecting us to in some way. And so it's nice to think about it as like the standard of what love should look like.
Yeah,
And
I don't
hopefully
know.
we can
Did
move to
you
it.
guys have a chance to watch the Bible Project video on love this week? I
did
watched
not.
it today after Tim talked, and it was so cool because one of the things that which Tim am I talking about? So after Tim Bounds talked this morning, I listened to the video by Tim Mackey, and he was talking about that those same two verses, and they're both in Deuteronomy. There's a verse where God says that he loves the foreigner, and then it's like just a couple verses later, it says, so you love the foreigner, right? And so it's basically saying, love your neighbor. Your neighbor is also the foreigner who's among you, and you should love that foreigner exactly the same way that I love that foreigner. So it's just so cool because it fits perfectly with what Tim was talking about.
Right.
Yeah. And when they use the word foreigner, it's basically stranger. Anybody that you don't know.
Yeah.
A person, anybody, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, if we all just loved, to think how much better the world would be. They should write a song about that.
They should.
I'm the person that doesn't know my neighbors though, because I'm an introvert and I don't talk to anybody. Kurt knows all the neighbors, but I know what kind of car they drive.
You know what, Kurt, you're onto something there. That the Beatles almost got it right.
Yeah, exactly.
It's not all you need is love. It's all you need is to love.
Yeah, exactly.
You should have made it a verb instead of a noun.
Little tweak to it.
Yeah. It would make the song way less catchy if you put the word to in there, but that's that's what it needs. It needs to be a verb instead of a noun.
And that's why I'm not a songwriter.
Yeah.
Nathan, when you were talking, I got to thinking about that word experience, like how, and Christina, along the same lines that you were thinking as well. It's like, how can we truly have that experience of feeling that kind of love that God offers, and then in turn offering that same kind of experience to someone else around us, so that they can see it and feel it in a tangible way. It isn't just like we keep saying over and over again, beat a dead horse, but it's just empty. It's something completely different. And I think there's so many opportunities. I was talking with Chris Nation this morning about this last week. As simple as I was at Walgreens, and the lady at the checkout counter, I was just thinking about, how do I love people better? And it was literally just rolling in my head all that whole afternoon. And I'm watching these people go through the checkout line, and the lady at the checkout counter was just looking down the whole time, never engaged anyone, never looked in their eyes, didn't look up. She wasn't mean. She was nice. Everybody seemed nice. She just wasn't being engaged. And so when I got up to the checkout counter, I just said, "Hey, how are you today?" And she looked at me, and in that moment, it just, something clicked in me. And I'm like, and I do this often. I try to say their names just so that they know that I see them, and I recognize that they're individuals and they're people. But there wasn't a huge, meaningful conversation. We didn't talk about Jesus or God or anything, but I just kept thinking, even if that small little moment was a small experience of the love that God has shown me, that I'm showing them, a seed planted of the love that God has to offer that person, I got to keep planting those little seeds and ask God to come back and water them and send someone to till the ground, and that they'll grow into something. And so I keep going back to this idea that we have opportunities, this week being a perfect time with For the Lou going on, it's a great time to really experience that and to show that in a tangible way. But how do we keep that going? How do we show people in the small things, in the words that we use, in our actions when we're driving, and the people we come in contact with that maybe rub us the wrong way? How can I do a better job of allowing them to experience the love of God through my actions? Not because I'm good at it, but because the Holy Spirit works through me and can spread that onto them. So anyway, that's just something that I've been thinking a lot about, something that's going on inside of me over these last year or two, honestly, that I'm just kind of keep rolling over in my head. It's like, how do I love? What does it mean to love people better? How do I love people better? What does that look like? And not just think about it, but tangibly do it as often as I can think about it, as often as I remember, keep that in the forefront of my mind. So anyway.
Yeah.
Can I ask another question? Just like want to ponder. I was just thinking like, okay, I feel like I'm somewhat better. Like, I think it's a hard concept for me to sometimes figure out like the best way to show love to God, like between like from me to him. Maybe it's just like I have this feeling that like I'm never doing enough to like show my love. Like I feel like it's so hard to be like, okay, God, like I want you to know this, but then it's, God's in a way, he's not like a tangible physical being that I can touch, or you know what I mean? So it's hard. So I'm just wondering like how you guys feel you show God love best. I mean, there's definitely ways that I do that, but it just never, I feel like I take a lot more than I give. Does that make sense?
Nathan, do you want to?
Well, so I'm gonna have a harder time telling you how I do this well because I don't. But I did go through Deuteronomy, kind of like, it's like you're setting me up here. But I went through Deuteronomy and I basically wrote down, so I wrote down that love is a verb, but it seems like every time love is mentioned or commanded, there's another action word next to it that helps to describe what love looks like. So every time in Deuteronomy, love is not by itself. It's like love God and then it gives you another thing. So it's cool because I just made this list of the different things that go with love that can kind of flesh out, I think, maybe what God thinks that looks like, at least for his people of Israel when he's making that covenant with them. So here's the things I wrote down. One big one that surprised me was in some of the verses, love just means choosing one over another. And so this is applied to God's choosing of Israel. So God chooses Israel out of all the nations. But it's also applied to the Israelites choosing Yahweh over other gods. And so it's just that idea of choosing one thing over another. You love something by choosing it, if that makes sense. It's even used, like there's this one example in Deuteronomy where it's used of a father choosing his firstborn, or it's basically saying if you have a wife that it's talking about, if you have multiple wives and you have one wife that you love more than another, and I almost guarantee you, like Moses is probably thinking about Jacob as he says all of this, right? Because I mean, this is the story of Jacob. So he says, if you have one wife that you love more than the other, but the unloved wife has your firstborn, still love the firstborn by giving them the inheritance. So in other words, like, don't, it's essentially, in that case, it's giving a negative example of choosing someone you shouldn't choose, right? But the word love there is being used synonymously with the word choose. So, and this happens a ton in Proverbs too. Like I went through, Proverbs is the second most, the place where love is used the second most. Psalms is the first. It kind of makes sense, right? Proverbs is second though. And I thought that was interesting because I was wondering, is there a connection between love and wisdom? Because, we've been talking about wisdom. And in Proverbs, it says several times, especially in the first 8 chapters, it says, love wisdom. love wisdom, and it almost always says love wisdom, and get instruction, or something along those lines. And it's basically just saying, like, choose wisdom over folly, choose this over that, right? That's what they mean when they say love. In that case, it means to actually choose something. So for me to love my wife means I choose her, I don't choose anyone else, right? It's to the exclusion of all these other things, if that makes sense. So that's one big one. The other ones that I saw, love means just keeping God's commands. Love means blessing. And so that was mostly in terms of, in Deuteronomy, that was in terms of God blessing Israel because he loves them. So his love for him means blessing. But our love for others could mean blessing. And I think you can bless God too. I think that's just praising him. The fear of God is in conjunction with love. So being in awe of him, serving God with all one's heart and soul, meeting people's needs. Specifically, the foreigner is the verse that it talks about. Walk in God's ways. So, know what he wants of us and do that, and then hold fast to God. So be faithful, be consistent. Maybe another way to say that would be loyal. That's basically the list. Like every time that the word love is commanded to the Israelites, like you should love God, and then it has all these other words that go with it, which I think kind of flesh out what it looks like to love God. If that helps, I don't know, but it was interesting for me.
No, that was really interesting. And that's exactly what I was kind of wondering, like if it gave any of that. So that's really cool. And that is helpful. I guess I just feel like it's never, I don't know, it's hard to measure love, and it's hard to know, like, I don't know. I think as a human, you just feel like you fall short. But that's interesting to hear, like those, I like practical steps.
Mhm.
That's how I function in life. So like, it's nice to hear some of those practical ways, and it makes me feel like maybe I am showing love to God, just, in ways I don't even know probably. So it's still
another cool concept for me, and I talked about last week and probably even the week before, but is this whole idea of like this all being we have a responsibility to the garden, to what God, where did the world start? How did God and live with humanity, and how was that relationship, and how were the relationships with others? And he wants to reunite us back into that. So if a way that I can honor God and to show him that I love him would be to do my part in that, and being responsible for the things in the garden, which are his people, his creation, like everything that he has. So what is his goal, and how do I play my part to bring us back to that, or to point back to Jesus, point back to God? Because I think all of that expresses our deep gratitude and love. I wouldn't obviously probably talk about God as much as I do, or do some of the things that I do to help people, if I didn't believe it or didn't have that experience myself or feel that experience. So, but as Nathan said, we all fall short of the glory of God. And that's why, that's another reason why I should love God so much, is because of everyone in this group, deserve it far less probably. And but that's the great part about it, is like, that's what makes God's love different than all these other religions and ideologies that we hear about. Is in every other one, there's conditions, there's things we have to do in order to earn that love. We don't have to earn God's love. So now all we're supposed to do is just express it back to other people, and that honors him. And I believe, for myself, I believe that is a way that I show God that I love him, and he fills in the rest, which there's a lot he has to fill in, but he fills in where I can't fill in. So, but anyway,
That's what he wants from us. I mean, as
Yeah.
long as we're, if we're worried, am I loving God enough, or am I showing enough love for God? I mean, that's what he's asking us to do. I mean, that right there, yeah, he'll fill in the blanks, like he said, but it's like, that's really what he wants from us, is for us to want to love him and to make sure that, our thoughts, are we pleasing him? And that's showing love is us thinking, are we pleasing him?
Anybody have anything else they want to add or ask or?
So I had a couple other cool things that I found actually from the Septuagint search, if you guys are interested. So in Proverbs, I found a connection between, I actually wasn't looking at the screen, so I don't know if you're interested or not, because no one said anything. You guys, are we, if we need to
Bring
be,
it, bring it.
So that was very presumptuous of me to just continue. So let's see, in Proverbs, this was interesting. There were a couple of times, I think a few times actually, where love and discipline were put together, which is also interesting. I mean, and that makes sense in the context of Proverbs, right? This is a father talking to a son for a lot of it, explaining, my son, here's how you should live. And it does talk about whoever a father loves, he disciplines. If he loves his son. It talks about that a little bit in Deuteronomy as well. God loves the Israelites, so he disciplines them. So that's interesting because you actually see that in the New Testament too. And so Mark 10 is the story of the rich young ruler, right? So in that story, the rich young ruler is talking to Jesus, and it says that Jesus loves him, or Jesus looked at him and loved him. And then the next thing that he says is, go sell all your stuff and, give the money to the poor, come follow me, right? I think that was Jesus's way of telling that guy some truth because he loved him. He wanted him to see, this is your hang up, buddy, and so it's just really interesting. Like there's that aspect of love as well, that sometimes we say the hard truth to people. So I thought that was kind of cool that carries through into the New Testament. Many times in the first three Gospels, Matthew, Mark, Luke, the word love is used to relate or restate the Shema. So actually it's in every Gospel, in Matthew, Mark, and Luke, it's the Shema is repeated using the word agapao, which I thought was cool. Yeah, John 14 through 17, we already talked about. Paul in Romans 9, that's really interesting how he uses the word love as the idea of a choice. Because in Romans 9, there's that quote that says, Jacob I have loved, Esau I have hated. And all that really means is I chose Jacob and I didn't choose Esau, right? So right there, it's that very clear idea of love means choosing. And you have to be a little careful with that one because ultimately, I think the Hebrew Bible makes it very clear that God chose Jacob in order to choose the entire world, because that was always his plan, right? Was to use this one family and through that family to bless all the nations. But it's there, I mean, love means choosing. And that's a way that God loved Israel. He chose them to be his people that were going to bring the message to the whole world. And ultimately, that's how God loves the whole world, right? John 3:16. It means I'm choosing you. Like I want you to be a part of my family. So I think that's just a cool idea. Oh, one other thing in Proverbs that's a big theme is when they say to love something, it's talking about like seeking after it, going after it, doing anything you can to get it, right? If you love something. So love wisdom, love instruction, love knowledge, do anything you can to get it. And then you see that, I don't
It could be your chocolate.
What's that?
That could be the chocolate.
Okay, all right. So we got it back around.
Right?
We can now say I love chocolate, and that's totally okay again. Because we will do anything to get it. Okay, here's what it is. So 2 Timothy 4:6, it talks about all those who love God's appearing. And so I think what it's talking about is they're seeking after it. They're waiting for it. They have this expectation for it. They want it. They long for it, right? And so love is being used in that way in that verse, which is cool. It's just neat to see they're thinking in Hebrew the whole way through. When they're writing these words, they're thinking in Hebrew. First John talks about the choice between loving the world and loving God. So again, that's the choosing aspect. Don't love the world, love God. Don't choose this, choose God instead. First John 3:18 makes it very, very clear that love involves obedience, because it says, don't just love by what you say, love by what you do. I mean, you can't get any more clear than that, right? And First John makes it very clear, we already talked about this, that love originates with God. So we love him because he first loved us. And that goes back to that Deuteronomy passage where God says, I'm going to circumcise your hearts because you can't do this, right? So I'm going to give you the ability to do this. And so I think it's really important we understand God's love for us first, right? And that's going to enable us to love others. And then in Revelation 12:11, it says they loved God more than their very lives. So again, that's the choice thing, right? So I choose God even more than I choose my own life. It's just, I don't know. It's really cool. Like just to see all these themes come to bear that fruit in the New Testament is really, really neat, I think.
Thanks for sharing that.
Yeah.
It was fun for me. So
I always feel like you find these very profound things that I would never find or see. So I appreciate what you share.
I don't think that's true though. I mean, truly, like I did this in an hour or two, but I just, like if you look for I don't know. Well, I mean, I'm also listening to a lot of NT Wright, so that's all going through my head right now. But I think it's just, if you look at the words, you're gonna see some of this stuff. Like it's there, and it's so, I don't know. It's really, really fun to see it because I've just never taken the time to see it before, So
I think I need to be better at looking at like patterns and themes and content. Like maybe I need to be looking a little more bigger picture, but it's good because this helps me to refine the way I'm reading and looking at things. So I just I keep tweaking. I think I'm getting better as I go, but it's definitely made me think about how can I think a little deeper about what I'm reading as opposed to just kind of taking it at the surface.
I mean, I like seeing your rabbit holes because I'm not looking hard enough for the rabbit holes. I might be looking over the holes and you're like looking all over the place. And I like it when you share because it's very insightful.
Well, thanks, but I think you put your finger on it. I am easily distracted. That's why.
In a
I'm
good
like,
way.
oh, look at this. And then I jump down there for a little while. I'm like, oh, look at this. I can't stay focused on one thing, but it does lead down some really interesting paths. That's one of the things they have 7 tenets in the Bible Project, like 7 different things that you should keep in mind when you're reading the Bible. One of them is that it's meditation literature, which means it was designed this way, like intentionally designed so that on your 50th reading, you would see something new, right? On your 100th reading, you would see something new because it's so rich and so dense that every time you look at it, you notice a new thing. And so that's why in Psalm 1, it talks about read it over and over and over again, every day and night, meditate on it, because there's always going to be stuff there. There's always going to be the rabbit holes. Every time.
It's good stuff.
So where are we at next week there?
Oh, good question.
We're on Levav, I think.
Oh, heart.
Yeah.
Is it heart?
Heart. Yep.
Yeah,
That's a
so
good one.
we got a little bit of a leg up on this one, right? Because didn't Tim talk about this in the a little bit in the class?
Yes. Yes, he
Okay.
did.
Yeah.
Yes.
So if you remember any of that from the class, he did talk about the way that we think of the word heart versus the way they do. But still, again, I'm sure there's tons to glean from this as well.
I look forward to seeing all the rabbit holes you find.
Okay, here's a fun one. Tim gave you this one this morning, and he just sort of like, by the way, so in the Shema, it's love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, strength, right? Is essentially the way that it's usually translated, I think.
Yeah.
In the New Testament, it's usually said, love the Lord with all your heart, soul, mind, and strength.
Yep.
So that's a fun little rabbit hole to jump down. Why is the extra word added in the New Testament? It's a fun little puzzle.
Yep.
So,
Oh boy.
so any other closing thoughts?
No.
Yeah, really appreciate this, you guys.
It times out so well. Like, of course, we would be talking about love for the Lou, right? It's absolutely
That was
perfect.
really good timing.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's almost like God had this planned out.
Oh, that's crazy.
No, it's weird.
Must be coincidence.
Yeah.
It certainly wasn't intentional on mine or Joseph's part, I don't think.
Not at all. Not at all. We're not that smart.
No, we're not.
Maybe Nathan, but not me.
No, not me.
Well, yeah, thank you guys for participating. You guys are always asking great questions, making me think. And I'm just a participant. I mean, I'm just always thinking about what you guys have to say. It really gets me thinking off of maybe the way I didn't think about it. So just keep asking the questions, keep bringing your stuff to the table, because this is really fun, really exciting. So, yeah.
Well, thanks for hosting. I appreciate it, guys.
All right.
Great.
Well, you guys all have a great night, great week.
All right.
Yeah.
You too. See ya.
Bye.
All right.
Bye,
See you
guys.
later.